We all know the taste of Texas barbecue is spreading across the Carolinas just as generations ago, our Carolina barbecue traditions spread west, adopting their own practices along the way. And when it comes to Texas barbecue in the Carolinas, not many people are doing it as well as a couple brothers in Cary. In fact, you might say they're doing it Dampf good. It's Nick and Bryce Dampf, and we're excited to welcome Nick to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. Thanks for joining us today, Nick.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, and before we get going too far, I got to ask about the recognitions you guys received last year from Texas Monthly and barbecue editor Daniel Vaughn. He included Dampf Good among the callouts in his articles focused on the United States of Texas barbecue. He called your stuff the best brisket in the North Carolina leg of the trip. And so, what does it mean to you, and what has that meant to your business?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. It's been a very humbling experience. When Daniel came out here, it was a surreal experience to get the chance to meet him. I've seen him on so many documentaries and YouTube channels and reading his articles for years. So it was awesome to get him out here, and having him write what he did was just, it was special because it just kind of validated what we're doing. I commend anybody that does barbecue. It's such a hard way to make a living. But even if you're not making a living, it's just a hard thing to do, So it was an honor, we really appreciated it.
Yeah, and we're excited to learn all about Dampf Good outside those opinions of the barbecue snob. But before we get that fire started, I want to invite the folks listening to visit Low and Slow Barbecue Show online at our website, lowslowbbqshow.com. You'll find all our great barbecue content, including interviews with pitmasters and barbecue businesses across the Carolinas and the South. You'll also find the Low and Slow Barbecue Show blog at lowslowbbqshow.com. Sign up for our newsletter, click the link, sign up, and we'll send the latest Carolina barbecue news, events, food truck schedules, and more directly to your email inbox on Tuesday. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. We got pictures of our barbecue adventures all across the South, which unfortunately does not yet include a stop at Phillips Farms in Cary, North Carolina. But I know Nick is going to paint a picture for what his business includes, and hopefully I can get to the Triangle soon and test it out. So Nick, give us the ground level view. What is Dampf Good Barbecue, and how did you get started, and when did you open?
Yeah, so it started back in 2021. I was still working at Cisco at the time, selling cybersecurity. And me and my wife had moved to North Carolina in 2018. And so we had just started doing pop-ups, or not pop-ups. We started doing cookouts at the house, inviting friends and family over, neighbors, people from church, and just kind of sharing what we had a passion for, which was hosting people and feeding them food that we thought was presentable, or at least kind of presentable. And so throughout the years of doing that, we kind of I fell in love with it. I've always been involved in barbecue. Just growing up, I'm from St. Louis originally, lived in Dallas, Texas for a little while. Then I've kind of bounced all around the country. And so I've always been around barbecue. And so it's always been something that's been a big part of my life. But it was probably right around COVID when COVID started. I was just ready to get out of corporate America. And I've always
Mm-hmm.
wanted to start a business. And, like God had plans for us and the stars aligned. And we started this business during COVID, doing pop-ups at the Raleigh State Fair, like fairgrounds for their flea market. And
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of took off from there. And then we got the
Yeah.
food truck here at the farm in 2022. And we've just been off to the races ever since. But
Great. So when I get to the location there at the farm, or anybody else visits, what can they expect? Describe the scene and how they order, and what's the environment like?
yeah, so when they get here, they can expect to kind of be transported to a space that doesn't feel like it belongs in RTP. So we're
Oh.
located on a 100-acre farm here, smack dab in like just south of RTP, right in the middle of Cary, Durham, and Morrisville.
Hmm.
And so when you pull in, it's just a big dirt gravel lot. We've got a bunch of pavilions set up that they'll use for their farmers markets in the spring and in the fall. But we've got a dedicated pavilion for us. So we've got our food truck under there. We've got our smokers under there. And so we've got a fully covered line where folks can stay out of the sun, stay out of the rain.
Mm.
So it's an all, it feels for the most part, unless it's too hot like today or it's way too cold, it is an all seasons affair. You know, we've got
Yeah.
all of our picnic tables are underneath a big pavilion. We've probably got about 20 of them out there.
Hmm.
So we've got a good environment to give people that restaurant experience, you know, just in the outdoors. I think that's the best way to put it.
Hmm. Now, is it table service or meat market style? I'm assuming.
So it'll be meat market style as
Yep.
best we can. So you'll walk up to the window and you'll order. It'll either be me or my chef, Gilberto, who will take your order.
Hmm.
We'll get your meat sliced in front of you. We'll get your side orders, and then you'll check out, and we'll send you on your way. You can go sit down, and we try to have some folks walking around and making sure everybody's doing okay, picking up trash and all that kind of good stuff too.
Okay. Now, we talked about Daniel Vaughn's recommendation of your brisket. Do you feel like that's your specialty? Is that your focus area, number one? And the other part is, what's the most popular amongst folks that come to visit?
Yeah, I would definitely say our brisket is probably our specialty. You know,
Hmm.
we spend a lot of time in that, making sure that it's as best it can be in terms of where we're sourcing our beef from,
Mm.
our cooking process, making sure that we stay ahead of anything. You know, our cooking process is constantly changing to try to figure out the best way we can possibly do things. But aside from that, beef ribs have become a pretty popular item.
Mm.
Something we do different than most places here in North Carolina is we do offer beef ribs every day.
Oh.
And so that is something you can get from us Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
Hmm.
And that was something we decided to do just because of how hard they were to get. And now they've usually are sold out by 1:30 or so, as long as it's a normal day.
Hmm.
But between those two, those would be our two specialties.
I got you. And so right now, I'll ask you a business question. Here in our climate, the prices of beef are going up, and it seems to be inventories are low. How is that affecting your business, and how did you or how do you sort of adapt to accommodate for that?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, it's something we're always staying on top of. You
Hmm.
know, we're always trying to find distributors that are willing to partner with us. Find a farm that's willing to get us a good product at a good price. And so right
Hmm.
now, we're using Good Stock Beef by Nolan Ryan, and so that's been a really
Yep.
good product for us. We get prime quality product, but it's at a price point that we can afford. You know, to keep our prices the same. That's been
Mm.
something that's been really big for us. We haven't raised our brisket price in probably the last 2.5 years.
Wow.
And that's been a big, I mean, part of it's because we're in a food truck. You know, the operational side of
Hmm.
things is definitely a bit less expensive than you would be in a brick and mortar.
Hmm.
So we try to do our best we can to do right by the customer and keep our prices as fair as we can. And by doing that, obviously, our supply does have to change when push comes to shove. We try to keep our supply below a certain point so we can maintain those prices.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So, you mentioned you spent some time in Dallas. You're kind of from the Midwest area. Why did you choose to go to the Texas barbecue route when you started here in Carolina barbecue country?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to answer that question is just how I grew up. And so in St. Louis and Missouri, not all, but most of the barbecue is very beef centric. I
Hmm.
mean, I know you got pork spare ribs and you got some other stuff that we do throughout the Missouri area, but there's still a ton of brisket. You know,
Hmm.
the competition barbecue scene is really what reigns supreme out there. And
Mm.
so competition style barbecue is what you're going to see at most barbecue joints out that way. Or if you move out towards Kansas City, you're going to see a lot of burn ins. But a lot of it's beef. And so
Hmm.
that's what I grew up eating. And then we moved to Texas. Obviously, it was more beef. And so it's been my go-to whenever I go to a barbecue place.
Hmm.
And you know, when we moved to North Carolina, I wanted to bring something to enhance the barbecue culture in North
Hmm.
Carolina. I didn't want to copy what people here were already doing. You know, I
Hmm.
think they're doing it to a really high level,
Sure.
and there isn't really a need for me to try to do that. And so I
Mm.
wanted to, when we started back in 2021, there wasn't very many of us that were doing it. I think Lawrence Barbecue had just opened that year. Prime had opened up not much prior to when we had opened up. And then John G's had been open for a little while, but he's so far away from the Raleigh area.
Hmm.
And so when I was getting ready to start the business, I just saw a hole in the market here. You know, there wasn't anywhere really doing brisket at the level that I feel that we could do.
Hmm.
So that really led us to making that decision.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of the other guys doing the Texas barbecue in a really unique and great way. Do you feel like you guys are apart from them? Is there anything that sets you apart from what they're doing?
I think what sets us apart, um, from the rest of the folks doing it would be our approach. One of the things when we started doing it, one of the reasons I fell in love with cooking brisket
Mm,
and doing Texas barbecue was cooking on offset smokers. And so when we set out to do the business, that was one piece that I pushed and pushed and pushed to make sure that we could continue doing,
mhm,
and so I think that's one of our biggest things. So here at the restaurant, we've got 3,000-gallon smokers, one from Syntex Smokers in Midland, Texas, and then the other two are from Primitive Pits
mhm,
out in Georgia. And so we cook all of our proteins on those smokers, and I think you get a little bit of a different result
mm,
off of those, a little bit more labor intensive, and
mm,
it's taken some time to get my team trained and get everybody up to speed for it. We have our issues here and there, but I think that really brings the authenticity to the brisket that we serve,
mhm.
and then we tried to source as close to wood as we could get here in the Carolinas that is close to Texas post oak as well. So we use a locally sourced white oak that's been aged for about 10 to 12 months or so. And it's very similar to what you'll find down in Texas, maybe a little bit more mild.
Mm.
But I think if I had to nail it down, I think that'd be what it is.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a real key ingredient. The wood that you use obviously makes a huge difference, especially in Texas barbecue. Now, I know you guys are involved in some events along the way. I know you've got just recently had a big anniversary celebration, but
Yeah,
congratulations on that. But
thank
you
you.
went to the Chef Rival event for Right for Revival. Tell me a little bit about that experience, sort of competing amongst a couple of other pit masters, and maybe how festivals and these food events fit into your business plan.
Yeah, so that was a really fun event for us. I got to bring my team. I got to bring my son with me, and we got to go down there and we did tri-tip there. So it was a little different than what we normally do. We brought our hog cooker up there, and we did that. Um, it was a blast, man. Right for Revival is a Christian organization
Mhm.
that shares a lot of values with us, and it was an awesome experience to be a part of that and be around a community of people who were trying to serve the community and make it a better place for folks around them. Um, and then I guess to answer your question about the like festivals and how they kind of fit into our business plan. I mean, they're not a huge focus of ours. We don't do a ton of local events. We've done more events outside of North Carolina. Like we did Windy City Smokeout last year in Chicago. And then we did Smoke and Sunshine in January down in Palm Beach, north of Miami. And those are fun events to get out and just rub shoulders with folks that are doing something similar to us, just in different places of the country. So I think they're fun, man. They're fun to get the chance to meet those folks, and it gets our brand out there, so people see the name and they recognize it.
Yeah, that's great, Nick, and I appreciate that insight. During your comments there, you mentioned that your son joined you on some of these events. And, I look over at your website at dampfgoodbbq.com and I see what appears to be your brother. You seem to be the taller of the
Yeah.
brothers. Tell me, hey, how does family fit into the business that you guys are doing there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a big piece. My cousin works with us. He's been with us since the beginning. He's my night guy. He's keeps to himself. He doesn't like to be the center of attention, but
Uh-huh.
without him, this operation would most likely cease to exist. So I really appreciate. His name's Hunter, and he's if you ever see him around working around the smokers or kind of hiding behind the food truck,
Uh-huh.
make sure to tell him thank you for what he does. And then when it comes to my family, I've got four kids. We've got a fifth one on due here in about 8 weeks.
Oh boy,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you.
Best
Thank you.
wishes.
I appreciate it. And so a lot of the reason I did this to get into being in business for myself is to be able to spend time with my family, involve them in what I do. That was one of the things that I didn't like about being in corporate America. I felt like I had my life outside of home, and then I had my home. I really wanted to try to bring those together.
Hmm.
And so I try to bring my son with me because he's my oldest. He's the only one old enough to do any of these things with me.
Uh-huh.
As soon as my daughters get older, they'll join me too. But it's a big for us, man. So we're working on a brick and mortar spot now. We're not ready to share a ton of details about it. And I'm sure you're going
Mm.
to ask about it a little bit later.
Yeah,
But I'll kind of spoil something about it.
sure.
So a big piece of the restaurant is we're going to try to make it as family friendly as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm personally excited about doing with the space is I stole the idea from Disney World. We went there a few years ago
Uh-huh.
with the kids, and we were standing in line for the Winnie the Pooh ride in Magic Kingdom. And I don't know if you've been in that line before, but it's pretty long. But what's cool about it is while you're waiting, they have like toys and like jungle gym and like all these things for kids to play with as you're waiting in line. So
Mm.
like the parents, we get a little break because the kids are distracted, and they get to kind of play with stuff as we wait in line. And so I kind of stole that idea. And so something we're working on designing right now is kind of a wall that separates the dining room from the line area and waiting area. We're gonna build in like toys and stuff for the kids to play with into that wall, so that way families can bring their kids, knowing that like even if there's a little bit of a wait, their kids will have something to play with. They don't have to worry about them getting too bored or feeling bad about being rambunctious with folks standing around them, and they'll be able to
Yeah.
just have a good time as well. And make sure that the kids have a good experience as well.
Yeah, that's an important part. If they're not going to enjoy it, they may not come back if you've got kids
Yeah.
going along for the ride, or certainly the kids having more fun makes it easy to revisit your new location. So talking about the horizon, you mentioned brick and mortar. Let's hear some more details that you can share at this point.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't share a ton just
Okay.
because we still have a lot up in the air.
Mm.
We've still got a lot to figure out with our lease. We got a lot to figure out with the town, but the general area, kind of where we're looking, is kind of in between Fuquay and Holly Springs
Mm.
here, which is about 20 minutes south of where we're currently
Hmm.
located. And the building's going to be around 3,000 square feet ish. We're trying to get at least as close to 100 seats inside as we can, so we'll probably end up around 80. And then we'll have a fully enclosed pit room out back behind the building where our outdoor seating area will be as well. So we're trying to bring that farm vibe that we have here with us to that location. And then we're going to try to, if we can, we're going to try to leave the food truck open as well, if I
Mm.
can find a team that I trust to do it right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like you've already got a pit smoker that can do it for you there, and your cousin
Yeah.
Hunter, maybe let him drive one of the ships, or
Yeah.
another family member bring that into us. Well, take us
Yeah.
back to your early start. Yeah, how did you get started smoking meat low and slow? Coming from the part of the world that you're in, it's kind of brought up in your genes a little bit, right? But how did you get started?
So I mean, I got started just hanging around with my uncle, which is Hunter's dad.
Mm.
Every time we had family events, we'd always go down to St. Louis and go hang out with them. And he was huge in the barbecue, so we'd always make brisket or pork steaks or
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever he wanted to make. He was out there cooking it, and he was a really good cook. And so I always enjoyed that, having that piece bring the family together. But I didn't formally get into it until me and my wife got married,
Mm.
and she bought me a little offset smoker from Home Depot. Classic story. Everybody
Yeah.
says the same story. So I got it really into it myself at that point, when we got our own house and I could start messing around and cooking in that. But that's when I got started.
But you were already in the food service business or the food business to a degree. So you had a little bit of a connection in there between, starting from the Christmas gift or whatever smoker to,
Yeah.
you at least had some experience there, right?
So this business is my first venture into food service. And so prior to this, I had only ever been in the technology
Oh,
sales
okay.
world. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I did out of college. I graduated back in 2015. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I did that for about 8 years before jumping over into this. But
Yeah, first time business owner. Obviously, some success through a lot of hard work. I want to help out our home smokers here, like just as you kind of got started doing it at home with that, home hardware store purchase smoker, if I'm out there as one of these backyard smokers, what are some tips that I can use to help maybe make my brisket something that would
Yeah.
wow the barbecue snob or the folks that are visiting Dampf Good?
Yeah. I've got a few tips for brisket. I
Mm-hmm.
would say the first one is obviously start with a good quality cut of meat.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is try not to, when we do our barbecue classes, we try to teach a few main components. So we always teach people how to trim the brisket. We always teach people how to season the brisket. And I think those are two very important steps. And then when we get into the cooking side of things, the biggest piece that we always teach people is how to manage the stall. And so I think that's where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
folks mess up in the backyard, is setting yourself up with success when you trim. So just watching YouTube videos, there's millions of them out there now to
Mm-hmm.
trim, be able to trim a brisket and season it. Make sure you're using enough salt. I think that's something a lot of folks don't do enough of, is salting it enough. And then if you get to that point, when you hit the stall, a lot of folks will wrap their brisket during the stall or before the stall.
Mm-hmm.
We try to push our briskets through the stall. Most of the time, we cook our briskets unwrapped
Mm-hmm.
the whole duration of the cook, and then we wrap them after they come off the smoker. Um, and so that'd be my biggest recommendation, is when you get to that 160, 165-ish temp, bump your temperatures up, and push the brisket through the stall instead of letting
Okay.
it sit there.
Yeah. Are there any tricks you can offer that might elevate the average brisket to like the best brisket?
I don't know, man. I'm trying to think. It's there's so many tiny little details.
Mm.
I think nailing the stall is a big piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of folks, they'll make a good brisket that has good flavor, but it's just dry. Pushing through the stall, you're going to retain a lot more moisture. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the biggest piece. So if you're cooking at 200, 225, bump to 250, bump it up 25, 30 degrees to push it through, because you kind of got to think about it like a freight train trying to drive up the side of a mountain. If you just kind of let it go at its normal speed, it's gonna slow down. It might stall out and start falling backwards. And that's kind of what happens with the brisket. They'll hit the stall, it pushes out so much water that it starts to cool itself off, and then the cook stops. And so if you think about it like that, you got to keep shoveling coals in the engine of the train to get it to
Mm-hmm.
get up the hill. And that's kind of what I teach my guys, is when we start getting up to that point where the brisket starts to feel like it's either stop moving or it's starting to slide backwards, we bump our temps up,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll maintain a higher temp through the rest of the cook.
And then after the cook is over, what do I do to preserve it so that it's enjoyable for right now and then maybe an extended
Yeah.
period?
So making sure you let it rest. So
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'd recommend at least a 3-4 hour rest. Um, but you can also hold it overnight. And so that's what we'll teach in our class too. So if you hold it overnight, either in a cooler, if you take it right out of the smoker, wrap it in a towel, let it cool off for a little bit, and then throw it in a cooler. Or if you let it cool, this is an important piece. If you're going to put it in any sort of heated environment, so like in your oven at keep warm, or if you have a warmer at home because you're crazy and you bought one, um, let it cool all the way down to like 144 or 145 before you put it in the warmer, or it will keep cooking. And so
Oh.
that's what we do here. So we'll let our briskets rest out of the smoker until they hit about 143, and then we'll put them in the warmer. And we'll let them rest at ambient temperature just on the table, and let them slowly come down. That's where sometimes we'll make mistakes because we're tired. We want to
Mm.
just throw it in the warmer and move on. Um, it takes about 2 hours, 2.5 hours sometimes for the briskets to cool off all the way.
Mm.
So just set a timer, go to sleep, and wake up an hour and a half later and check it. Um, but but yeah, the overnight rest can definitely help. It'll
Yeah.
reabsorb all that moisture and allow that collagen to turn in the gelatin and give it that nice, good mouth feel that everyone's looking for.
Right. So great instructional advice there. You mentioned barbecue classes, and I see them listed at your website, dampfgoodbbq.com. How often do you have the classes?
So when I'm not expecting a baby, we try to do which some of my friends will poke fun at me for that. One of my good friends, Robert Lerma, which would be a fun one to have on the show too. He's a barbecue photographer.
Oh,
He
yeah. Yeah.
always
I
he
follow
always
him.
Yeah, he always jokes around with people that he's too scared to get too close to me because he'll get pregnant, and so it's. um, but yeah, if we're sorry, it might be TMI, but if that's not the case, if life is normal, we try to do them once every other month.
Oh,
So we'll try to do about 6 a year. We've gotten on that schedule at the beginning of this year. We just kind of got off track, but once we get into a more stable situation, either waiting for the brick and mortar or just at the later half of the year,
mm,
we'll start doing them every other month. And we've kind of partnered with M&M Barbecue Company. So we've got a backyard pit coming from them
mm,
that we're going to use to do all of the cooking on that for that class. So we try to offer a few different varieties. We've got our backyard class, which is where we cook pork belly, which is our bacon brisket, or we'll do our spare ribs or our turkey. We'll cook all three of those like with the customer during the duration of the class, so we can kind of
mhm,
go through all of the steps, everything that we do to make sure that that turns out right. And then feed everybody. That's about a 6.5, 7 hour class.
mm,
And then we do a brisket class, which is definitely not as long as I'd like it to be, but it's tough, man. It's tough getting people out here for 10 hours, you know. So
mhm,
it's like we'll do a concise like 3 hour long brisket class where
mhm,
we'll spend a good amount of time teaching folks how to trim, how to season, and then we'll walk through our brisket process and show them on the smoker. I think one unique thing that we do with that class is we try to time it up on a Friday night where the briskets are coming off the smoker when we're finishing the class. And so we'll let our students help us pull briskets off the smoker so they can get a feel for when a brisket's done. I think that's one of the biggest advantages us guys in the restaurant business have is we cook so many briskets. You know, we've cooked thousands of briskets, and when you get the feel for when a brisket's done is when you really kind of unlock that the ability to produce good brisket
mhm,
consistently. It was when you get that feel for when it's done. Most everybody you ask that's in the business is going to tell you that that once you kind of unlock that ability, you know, it just gets a lot easier because you can go through with if you've got 50 briskets on the smoker, you can just go through real fast, put your hand under the smokers, poke them, and you know if they're done or not. So you can check all
mhm.
50 pretty quick. And so we'll give people hands-on experience with that. Um, but yeah, so those are the two we
Okay.
offer now, and then we're planning on doing some other fun stuff with it in the future when we have better facilities.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll keep your eyes open for them. It's obviously at the website. Shoot us an email at lowandslowbarbecueshow@gmail.com, and I'll include it in the newsletter and keep everybody up to date. As we get ready to wrap it up here with Nick Dampf from Dampf Good BBQ, Nick, you're doing all kinds of things. You're having a class, you've got a business you're building, more babies on the way. What keeps your fire burning? Why do you keep doing this?
So there's a lot of ways to answer that question. So obviously I love doing barbecue, you know, but
Mhm.
I mean that's only going to get you so far. This business gets really tough. I mean, this morning it was 105 degrees in the food truck.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, when we're at 5 in the morning, you know, you can only imagine how hot it is right now. Um, but I mean, I think there's two answers to that question, or three answers to that question. It's the people that come here. You know, it's my employees, my family. But a big part of my business personally is my faith. You know, that's been a big part of what we do and how we kind of base our business, you know, is serving people like Christ served us, you know, and trying to share the gospel and share um, to share that biblical love that's so rare these days
Mm,
with our guests that come through the doors and with people that we get the chance to rub shoulders with in the community. And so that's ultimately what does it. You know, if I did not have that, I do not think I would be doing this because it requires a lot and there it's a tough way to make a living, but I do it to honor God, and I do it because I feel that I'm commanded to do everything I do the best I can.
and that, my friends, is the final word from Nick Dampf from Dampf Good BBQ at Phillips Farms in Cary, North Carolina. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, man. I appreciate you having me.
You've been listening to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast stream and share that podcast with your food-loving friends. And be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can see all our photos and videos of our barbecue adventures and interviews, maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff too. Don't forget, when you visit lowslowbbqshow.com, you can sign up for our newsletter, get the latest barbecue news delivered to your inbox Tuesday mornings. We'll have Nick's class schedule on there as soon as it comes out. Thanks again to our guest, Nick Dampf from Dampf Good BBQ. Thanks as well to the whole team at the Mesh.tv network of podcasts, especially our producer, Andrew Moose, who always keeps us looking and sounding good. Finally, thank you for listening to the Low and Slow Barbecue Show. Remember, for the best barbecue and the best barbecue podcast, keep it low and slow.